Hello, welcome back. This is our 16th audio. And so far, we have seen what is diabetes and what actually causes diabetes. And we talked a lot about insulin as a hormone and how important it is and how it is connected not only with diabetes but with so many diseases. Actually, metabolic syndrome was initially named or called as a insulin resistance syndrome, but then they changed the name. So we are all now familiar with that. We also saw what is the definition and what are the effects of increasing resistance and a higher level of insulin. We have also touched upon all these, not gone in detail, but like obesity is one connection which is going to be very important. We will deal with it separately. So now in this session, what I want to do is I want to go into the causes of insulin resistance, because unless you know the causes, you won't have the remedies, right? So we will go into the causes and the possible remedies, and then I am also going into a little bit of biochemistry of actual mechanism. Now this part all of you may not be interested in, so you can skip, but I would suggest that it's a difficult part to understand, but just go ahead and have a look at the document that I have prepared. If nothing else, at least you will sort of get awed, how complexity and how well the body is doing its function. Yeah, so let's begin. So we have defined insulin resistance as a condition where insulin is not having its proper effect, it's not working efficiently, the body cells are not responding to insulin's presence, and therefore pancreas have to keep on making more and more and more quantity of insulin in order to sort of get the sugar inside the cell. Even then in the end it fails, and this high insulin resistance causes a lot of problem. So that's about insulin resistance definition. Now this is actually a very, very complex topic, and even the experts, some of the experts I rely on and I learn from them, none of them hesitate to admit that they also don't understand this whole topic fully, how exactly it happens, because the problem is the different organs have different way of reacting to insulin resistance, and all of them don't develop similar kind of insulin resistance. So if your muscles are highly insulin resistant, doesn't mean that your liver will be, or your brain will be, or your adipose tissues will be, so each organ system has a different extent to which it has developed insulin resistance, and the implications are also different. But for diabetes, we are mainly concerned with entry of sugar, and brain has a different mechanism, so I will just touch upon it little later. But most of the sugar is consumed and needed by muscles, right? And don't forget, heart is a muscle, so it includes heart also. So most of the glucose is taken up by by muscles, and when muscles develop insulin resistance, that's a big problem. Therefore, we are going to focus only on insulin resistance as depicted for muscles, not for liver and adipose, because that is not really involved with diabetes. Now, if you start looking at the various components, various steps through which insulin acts, then you will see that the problem could be threefold. That means at three stages the problem can come. First is, of course, if the insulin is not docking properly or is not getting connected in a lock and key manner with the receptor. Now this can happen if there is a shape mismatch. And about this shape, if we get a time at the end, I would like to explain to you how enzymes work and how hormones work and how many things in our body work through shape recognition. But because of analogy of lock and key, you must be getting a good idea that these two shapes, the hormone insulin and the insulin receptor, they sort of match each other. It just goes and gets inserted as a key gets inserted in that slit in the lock. Similarly, insulin goes and sits on the on the receptor, gets engaged with it. It sort of gets it binds with it. Yeah. Now that is one way. So that can go wrong. So if the shape of the receptor is damaged, if the shape of the insulin is damaged, that means if there is some amino acid is different, then its three-dimensional shape will be different. Then of course it won't fit, no, and so then the reaction won't start only because the receptor is not receiving the insulin binding, so it will not get activated. Very simple, right? But this is very uncommon. So we can rule out, and if somebody has this problem, probably there is a genetic component, and in the childhood only you will come to know that your receptor is not working properly. Second reason could be that there is no matching problem, but the number of receptors is less. That again is connected with little bit with genetics and also on the conditions. Because number of receptor is dynamic, so it's not that a cell has say 8,000 insulin receptors all the time. So whenever it doesn't need, it will reduce the number of receptors. Whenever it wants more glucose, it will increase the number of receptors. So this is one way, of course, but it will not happen that the problem comes because you are having too few receptors. Even if the number is little less, like brain cells, when you're talking about billions, if some are missing, it doesn't really matter. It's over-designed sort, right? So very few cases where this is a problem. So we can rule that out. So now we boil down to two things. One is that the receptor number itself is less, and yes, that can happen. That can happen in a sense that the cell is capable of having more number of receptors, but it produces less number of receptors, and that is part of the resistance. Because why is it producing less number of receptors? Because it doesn't want glucose. So one of the ways it does is that it will reduce the number of receptors, but it can't make it zero. Okay, it still is a large number. So even if they reduce the number, still insulin will be able to push enough glucose inside. So this is a factor, but again not something that is a stumbling block or which is a limiting step. So the limiting step is the last problem in the step is that thus insulin goes and binds with the receptor, everything all right, the receptor starts functioning, and we will see what is the mechanism, and then you will see that when insulin sits on the receptor and there is alpha unit and beta unit, we'll see that, and the beta unit changes its conformation, it starts a series of reactions inside which ultimately lead to the opening of the window. Now these series of reactions go through many enzymatic pathways, and those pathways the cell can either upregulate or downregulate. That means it can produce more of those enzymes and activate them more, or it can downregulate. That means they are not activated by the cell. Now, see, the cell doesn't want glucose, right? It doesn't want the energy, and you are trying to push the energy into it. So it cannot prevent insulin sitting on the receptor. That's an external thing. So it has no control over that. So what control it has is that when it sits on the insulator, it can refuse to listen to the message, and it can sort of overrule the message, and that's exactly what it does. So these are the reasons. So why does it happen? This is how insulin resistance develops. So where is the down regulation of the reaction going inside the cell? That is our main problem. Now let us see what are the reasons why the insulin resistance develops. The first is, of course, high level of insulin. See, the way body has got evolved. So whenever I say when body is designed, please understand that it's just a way of saying. Nobody has designed it. It has evolved. So the way we evolved is that if body receives anything in excess than what is normally it is meant to be, it becomes insensitive to it. Now that's true about all addictive things like heroin, smoking, so even drinking, right? So you may get the kick after half a peg when you start the drinking habit, and soon you find that you need to become high. You need 2 or 3, 4 pegs. Similarly, smoking. Similarly, all these drugs like heroin and ganja and charas and whatever, the initial quantity that could trigger the satisfaction in you, that doesn't happen with the same quantity. You keep on needing more and more quantity, which means that body is becoming resistant, becoming less sensitive. So exactly same thing happens with the insulin. So if you are constantly exposed to high level of insulin, automatically cell learn that this level I don't want, because it is pushing too much glucose into me, so I must become desensitive, I mean less sensitive. So this is one way of becoming resistant. Now this is a very dangerous way, because this forms a vicious cycle, once you become more insulin resistant, the pancreas will produce even more insulin, and that even more insulin will lead to even more resistance. So this is a vicious cycle. Then the second reason is that this long exposure of insulin and higher concentration, it leads to some kind of degradation of the receptor. Now, so if the receptor is degraded, then that binding is not proper or efficient, right? So again, there will be a problem. Now, third is obesity. Again, obesity is a cause of insulin resistance. Also, it is a reason for the insulin resistance. So it's a vicious cycle. And one of the mechanisms through which obesity leads to insulin resistance is because of the inflammatory signals that it generates. Now, the fourth, fifth, and sixth, these reasons, next 2-3 reasons are ones which are most important. So, chronic inflammation, we have already talked. See, chronic inflammation has a hand in everything. Everything bad that happens in the body, you will find that chronic inflammation is involved somewhere. Even obesity, I just now said that it is through inflammatory signals that it helps in developing insulin resistance. Now let us come to the two main factors. Two main factors in a sense that these are under our control, and it's my estimation that 70 to 80% of our insulin resistance problem is because of these two. And that's why I said that there is no 100% guarantee, because if your insulin resistance is because of factors other than these 2-3 factors, then changing the diet is not going to make that much difference. But that's why I said that, originally I said that my confidence level is 70 to 80%, because 70 to 80% people have a problem because of these two issues. What are the two issues? Excess glucose nutrition. So that is like forcing the glucose on cells, saying take it. See, it is like that game, where you pass on the handkerchief, and when the music stops, whoever is holding the handkerchief, he is out, so he is penalized. So what you do is, as soon as you get the handkerchief, you try to pass it on to the next person, right? Because you don't want to hold it. It's a poison. So similarly, every cell in the body, if it knows that it can utilize it, yes, then it will gladly accept the glucose, because it's a lifesaver, it's an energy giver. But if it doesn't want, then it says, no, I don't want. So blood itself is carrying glucose, but it also doesn't want, so it tries to push it onto the cells. Now, if you are in a hunger state and you want the glucose, then naturally the cells would be very happy. Say, come, give, they will accept. But if the situation comes, and not once, twice, right? Every day, every time, if the situation comes that there is a glucose in the blood available, but cells don't want it because they can't consume, they have limited capacity of consuming it into energy. And what will they do? I mean, you can't just produce the energy and then store it for later use. There is no facility. The energy storage in body is in the form of ATP. We will talk about that currency of energy whenever I get a chance. But it is not possible that you store energy, like this isn't a battery-like thing we have developed. So you can store energy in the battery and then use it later on. No such energy storage is available. So it has to be either used immediately or convert it into fat, and only liver can convert it into fat. Therefore, all the muscle cells, they just take glucose, either burn it or convert it into glycogen and store it. Beyond that, if you are trying to supply, they will say no, and then they will start. What they will do? They can't, as I said, they can't disallow insulin sitting on the receptor, so they will down-regulate the further process. See, it's like a small child, you are giving the child food, and see, child knows how much it wants. So as soon as his stomach is full, or if he says that my hunger is over, what does the child do? It shuts his lips, it will close his mouth. And then what do we do? Again, like in our own wisdom, we force the lips apart, force him to open the mouth and dump the food in his mouth. Although he is protesting wildly, shouting, crying, saying no, 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 no. But then next time it will try to shut the mouth even with harder effort, So it is trying to prevent you putting food into its mouth, although it may not succeed all the time. So similarly, the cell is protesting, I don't want your glucose, I don't want your glucose, so it down-regulates those processes. Yeah? Now, that's very clear, isn't it? That's what will happen. Now, another thing is spike in glucose. See, quantity is one thing overall, but if that quantity is dumped in one lot, like when we eat fresh sugar, glucose, instead of eating vegetables where it goes into blood slowly, so body can handle that slow release of glucose. But if you suddenly dump 10 grams, and we have seen 20 times you have to multiply to see how many units. So if you take 1 spoonful of glucose, immediately it goes in the blood, and if there is no insulin action, we have seen 5 into 20, it will increase the glucose reading by 100 units. So this kind of spike, body is not able to handle, because the pancreas are confused. They don't know whether this is the only glucose it has come and now nothing is going to come, or it will keep on coming at that rate. So it sees the rate at which the glucose is being dumped. It probably assumes that that is the rate at which the glucose will keep on coming, and it overproduces the insulin. And then that is not needed, so you feel hungry, so again you feel hungry and then you take more. So it's a cycle, and then because of this imbalance of sudden spike in the insulin level, and suddenly lot of glucose is made available to the cells, again that leads to insulin resistance. Now, fatty liver, that is excess fat in the liver, is a big disease. It's not only connected, it's disadvantage not only in terms of insulin resistance, but the fatty liver in itself is a big disease, because it can lead to non-alcoholic type sclerosis. And you know how important liver is, and liver sclerosis is a very serious condition, and mainly 2 reasons are alcohol consumption and fatty liver. So how liver becomes fatty is something we will try to see whenever we get an opportunity. That means producing a lot more fat than it can dispose of in terms of these LDL, VLDL, all these particles. And this is where fructose will come into picture, because many times fructose is responsible for fatty liver. And so when we talk about fruits in diet, I will talk about this danger. It's not a big danger unless you really eat huge amounts of fruits, because so don't get worried that if you eat 1 or 2 fruits in a day and whether you should stop that. Not necessary at all. That kind of fructose the liver can very easily handle. But just be aware that fructose is one of the reasons why we not only get fatty liver, but then excess fructose level in itself. That means in addition to fatty liver problem, in addition to that, in itself also, that means even if you don't get fatty liver, fructose level in blood high level is itself correlated with insulin resistance. Now, exact mechanism, it's not very clear what exactly happens. So I will say that this fatty liver, excess fructose, etc. have a very strong correlation. The causative mechanism is not exactly known, but the correlation is so strong that there is no doubt that fructose does play a real role. Now, mitochondrial health or its dysfunction is also correlated with insulin resistance. Being under stress is an obvious reason, because this in fight or flight response, what happens is body is preparing you to either fight with the tiger or run away with the high speed, and for both you need energy. So it dumps lot of sugar from whatever sources like glycogen and all, it breaks and it dumps that glucose in the bloodstream so that you will have enough energy to either run or fight. But in modern life, we have seen that there is no tiger, there is no physical danger, Everything is psychological danger. So you have fought with the boss and you are very annoyed, and that also unfortunately triggers the same response. But now you can't run away from the boss, nor can you have a fight with him. So what will happen to this glucose that body has dumped in your blood? Nothing. It will stay there, right? It will stay there, and that's how it leads to diabetes, the stress part. But then it also leads to insulin resistance. Smoking, alcohol, they are connected with all the bad things, so they are also connected with insulin resistance. I won't say that that's a major part. Also, I won't say that in a very moderate quantity they may be causing a huge problem. Huge problem is excess glucose, because that's why we will try to tackle that. Sometimes excessive use of steroids also causes insulin resistance. Now we come to factor which we can't do much about, which is genetics and age. So these are the two things we have to accept. With age, of course, body starts becoming more and more insulin resistance, and genetics also plays a role. But I would say, look, genetics has not changed in last 50,000 years, right, or 100,000 years. So how many people do you think, estimate, because I don't think measurements are available, from overall health picture, I would say that less than 5% people were insulin resistant just 3-4 generations back. And now I would say that 70% people are insulin resistant. So this has not come through genes. Genes have not changed like that. It's our nutritional habits that have changed. And age also, we have to accept that, and then you have to be more careful. That means if you are older than 60 years, you have to be more careful that anyway you have a disadvantage in terms of insulin resistance. So you have to take better care of your nutritional habits, right? So now what are the remedies? So remedies, obviously, if the main factor is the nutrition, then we have to concentrate on that. So you must have started getting the feel of what I'm going to say, but let me just spell it out that if excess carbs is what is causing a problem, then sort of decreasing the carb, or in an extreme case, if your insulin is a high level is 5, 6, 7 times more, so something is more than 20, 25 fasting glucose level, then for some time, at least till you become sensitive, you have to cut as much carbs as possible. Now, how much cut, that we will see after diet. For every individual, what is your all different hormonal balance, and what is your insulin level, what type of food you eat, and then we describe the 6 levels, and then we will get we develop some thumb rules as to what level of carbs you need to avoid. Let me just emphasize again and again, because when some people listen to this advice, they feel that I am anti-carb, and I advise people to eat only meat and all. No, not at all like that. In fact, after the 6 months are over, if you ask me, if you are in good health condition, and once you have decreased the insulin resistance, the ideal diet would be actually not vegan, because vegan has issues which are not easy to tackle. If you can tackle them, yes, vegan is also good. But mostly it is vegetarian, because non-vegetarian food has problems. We will see those when in the diet. What are the problems? But then it's a great source of nutrition, it's a great source of vitamins, it's a great source of protein. So very difficult to manage the proteins on vegetarian diet. So how to manage all that balance, that again will come in the diet part. But right now what I want to say is that I'm not at all anti-carb. See, carb is a general term. There are absolutely, glucose is also carb, and vegetables are also carb. Now one is a absolutely means absolutely bad carb, and other is a very good carb. So you can't generalize. But in case of insulin resistance, what happens? Insulin resistance develops because of the excess nutrient of carbs, which are probably bad in nature. If you are taking a lot of vegetables, I don't think you will ever develop insulin resistance. But once you are insulin resistant, then there is nothing like good carb or bad carb, because the vegetables also go, ultimately they get converted into glucose. No, slowly, but they get converted into glucose. Now, when the glucose molecule approaches cell for its entry, the cell doesn't know whether it has come from vegetables, or whether it has come from sucrose, or whether it has come from what, right? It's a glucose molecule. And if it is resistant to glucose molecule irrespective of its origin. That is why we will have to really curb carbs. So that will be one of our main strategy. The another strategy will be obviously to avoid insulin spike. That means reduce the glycemic index of the mixture and glycemic load. Yeah? Exercise training is again very, very important because it activates this GLUT4. We will see what is GLUT4. This mechanism of glucose entry without very active help of insulin. So if you exercise, you will see that even those people who are resistant to insulin and not having good level, their glucose level will also go down once they exercise. So exercise, you constantly exercise, then and keep the insulin level low, it will ultimately reduce your insulin resistance. Sleeping well, yeah, it helps everywhere. So now the intermittent fasting. So intermittent fasting is a very, 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 very powerful weapon. We will specifically spend a lot of time on intermittent fasting. It has advantages in terms of autophagy. It has advantages in terms of detoxifying body. And then for a long time, like if you do the 16-8 model, then for 16 hours you are not eating, so your insulin level mostly is very low. So that's a very strong, very powerful method of reducing insulin resistance. Fiber is a very important thing. We will talk a lot about fiber, but mainly the microbes in the colon, they need the fiber. So it is their food. Our body cannot digest fiber, but still fiber is important. One is of course constipation, but another is that this is a great food for good bacteria, and they convert it into small chain fatty acids. These fatty acids are very helpful in maintaining the integrity of the endothelium barrier in intestine. And if that barrier is good, then these undigested protein molecules don't go out in the blood and are not able to cause inflammation. So inflammation level goes down very much, and that's how it helps reducing insulin resistance. Now make sure that you have these vitamins. Now they play also again role in most of the reactions that go on in the body, right? So D, B, potassium, chromium, zinc, these are the ones which are, all vitamins are important, and every vitamin plays good part in many areas, but these are the more important parts. Then decrease inflammation is a general advice for anything to do with metabolic disorder, right? Now this is going to be a slow process, because see, you have developed resistance over number of years, maybe 40, 50, 60 years, because right from your childhood probably we have hardly spent a day when we were hungry in the sense कि कब मुझे खाना मिलता है, otherwise I'm going to faint. वो स्टेज कभी आता ही नहीं है. We keep on feeding the body whether it wants or not. So this, your whole system of body fat burning is got rusted, and insulin has taken a deep root. So it is going to take time. So be patient. We will have, that's why it takes 3 months, 6 months, right? It doesn't happen in 1 week. So we will explain all that when we go to the protocol. So this is about what remedies. The remedies are directly based on the causes. So now I'm going to talk about little bit about the mechanism. Now those who are not interested in any chemistry at all, they can perhaps skip the next 10 minutes. But I would advise that you listen, and also you go through the document that I have prepared. It will give you idea about what our body is doing. Now entry of glucose is a very relatively simple process, isn't it? Body carries out so many phenomenally difficult tasks. Say synthesis of steroid. I mean, you can't make those steroids in the laboratory. But even for this such a simple step, just see what a complex process is involved. So this information now is going to be a lot of biochemistry. You will not understand unless you are from biochemistry background. Then otherwise you will really not understand everything that I say. But I think you will understand enough to get overall sense of what is happening. So all not only this pair, but all many systems act on the shape. The enzymes, the catalysts, they also work on the shape basis. All hormones work on the shape basis. So maybe at the end, if I get 5 minutes, I will talk about that. Uh, so all proteins have three-dimensional structure, no? So protein as a food, as a supplier of amino acids, it doesn't have to be three-dimensional. So when protein is formed, all these different amino acids get connected with each other, and then in the last step there is a folding step. So in that folding, they get a three-dimensional structure, and then they get that particular shape. So if that particular shape is distorted, if the folding is not proper, or if some of the amino acids are not the ones which are supposed to be there, then it will not work as a hormone, or it will not work as an enzyme. It will still work as a supplier of amino acids. So as I said, when this insulin sits or binds with the insulin receptor, now you look at the diagram 2, and I have given a description also. So perhaps if you read through that description, then this part is not enough. But just let me explain that this. So the conformation of this beta part changes, these legs separate, and that leads to phosphorylation. Phosphorylation is a method of energy transfer in most of the biochemical processes. And when that happens, then there is a pathway called PI3K. So there is phosphorylated, or you can read that. So that pathway. Now what that pathway is, that you have to Google and check if at all you are interested. These are all very complicated names, and you will get even more complex names. So I think it's enough to think that there is something like PI3K pathway which gets triggered, and this leads to another pathway called PIP3/AKT. So these are all signaling pathways, and these signaling pathways involve different enzymes. And then these in turn leads to AKT/PKB signaling pathway. You can, if you are interested, you can Google all these names of these pathways, and then they'll tell you what the pathway. But unless, as I said, unless you have biochemistry background, you will not understand anything, because the names, these names will lead to even more complex names. So this finally, after these three, this is the third step, right? First is the phosphorylation, then second is the PI3K pathway, then there is a PIP3-AKT pathway, and the fourth step is then this alters the subcellular distribution of glucose transport vesicle. So there is a GLUT4 transport. So there the intracellular storage, it brings to the plasma membrane. So this process is known as GLUT4 translocation. Again, you need not really understand this. What happens is these GLUT4 vesicles, they have a channel in it, and that gets activated. That channel from inside, it comes out. So it's like folding a paper shape inside out. So the channel which was inside, it comes on the surface, and then there is a we call kinesin motors. So these are the things that can move things around inside the cell. So these kinesin motors get attached to these GLUT4 vesicles, and then they bring it to the membrane. Then this vesicle fuses with the membrane, and then that provides a opening through which the glucose can enter. Yeah. So once the glucose enters, then again this process ends. The hole is closed. The vesicle goes in. The insulin gets detached, and a new process starts. Yeah. So that's how these 4 or 5 steps after insulin sits on receptor, all of them have to go through very, very nicely for this whole thing to be done properly. So job well done. One glucose molecule enters, and like that millions and millions of molecules have to enter. Right? So if this whole process works fine, we are in great shape. If it doesn't, we have a problem. So now I think we have got a good idea about what insulin resistance is, how important it is, what are its causes, what are the remedies, and the remedies, how exactly to apply the principle is sort of now coming out, right? But then how can you decrease the carbs like that, and what should you substitute it with is something we will deal with when we talk about diet. And we know when we understand the diet, everything, all principles about it, then we will develop a protocol, and then we will see how that protocol has to be individualized. That is the most important thing. You can't have one protocol which will work for everybody. So it will have to be individualized, and that's where it will be necessary for you to understand this whole thing, because I'm not going to be able to develop an individualized protocol for everybody. That's what you will have to do, right? So that's why you need to understand all this. Okay, so maybe I can just talk a little bit about how these messages are sent. So body controls by all the reactions and every movement, everything, by giving it a signal, right? So the signal is given through two mechanisms, basically, actually more than two, but most important are the two. One is the nervous system and another is a hormonal system. Now these systems have different way of working and also different targets. Okay. Now nervous system, it goes to a specific point, to a specific neuron, to a specific part, and gives a signal individually to that neuron. So when there is a movement needed, the signal will go to the particular part which the muscle which needs to move. It will tell him, move. So it will move. So move means it. So it's a individual message given to individual. But then the problem is you have to be sophisticated, not to give that message to something else, but only to that part. Now another is, there is a general message, but then in first we are giving it to specific person, so you can ensure that others don't receive it. Now hormones are distributed through blood, and they come and all the cells are washed in this hormone. So how do you make sure that only correct users should use these hormones and not others? So that is through shape. So cells have receptors for everything. The receptor for different hormones. So they will have a receptor for insulin as well as all other hormones also. And shape of each receptor would be different. So whenever it needs particular hormone, then that receptor will work. So you can the analogy would be like sending a message through, say, email or by letter. So that letter is written for a specific purpose, and it goes and is received only by that one person. The others don't get to read it also. So that is like a nervous system, more specialized, but requires more effort, right? And another is like radio, so you are just broadcasting a song, and whoever has a receiver will be able to listen to that song. If you don't have a receiver, you cannot listen to it. So hormone system works like the radio broadcast, where the broadcast is just going everywhere, and the cells which have proper receptor, they will receive and get affected. Others won't get affected. And nervous system is like a specific letter or email sent to a person. So brain, we think, is a controlling unit. But how does brain communicate? What is the language? Because language has to be taught, right? There is no teaching involved. So it has to be some way of communication which is automatic and obvious. So there are three ways. One is that if you have electrical difference, so one is positive, one is negative, they will automatically go and react. They will get attracted to each other. So that is one way. In brain is all the voltage difference through which all the neurons communicate with each other. Then other is chemical reaction. So positive and negative ions, they will combine. So a lot of chemical reactions happen that way. You don't have to send you react. They come together, they will react. And the third way is like by shape base. So if you want to say tree, so you have to write T-R-E-E. But how will child understand T-R-E-E unless you teach it to him? But you show him a picture of tree, this is tree, right? So shape is instinctively known that this is a shape and this is what the shape means. So similarly, all these, other than this, the chemical route and electrical route, all other communication in the body is done through shape recognition. So shape matches, they will know that that is what the message is. So this is beauty. I mean, the way body has evolved to take care of all these requirements is phenomenal. Okay, so let's stop at this and one more audio to go. Then we will finish with the diabetes, and then I think probably we'll take a week's gap for Christmas vacation. It will also give you time to catch up, and then we will start diet. We'll do some part of diet, then go back to obesity, and then again go back to diet, and then develop the protocol, and then we will go to CVD. Right? Okay. Thank you very much. All the best.